After my twin sister died in a car accident, I found out that I didn't exist. A MR.CREEPYCORE original creepypasta. I want to start with the paperwork, because the paperwork is the part nobody believes, and it's also the part one can prove. Everything else, the mirrors, the photographs, the thing that started calling itself by my name, you can chalk up to grief if you want. Grief does strange things to the mind. I've read all the studies now. I've read more studies on twin loss in the last 4 months than most grief counselors read in their whole careers. But the paperwork is real. The paperwork is sitting in a folder on my kitchen table right now, and I still don't have an explanation for it that doesn't make my hands shake. My name is Josephine Caraway. Everyone calls me Josie. Everyone called us both Josie, actually, in the beginning, before anyone could tell us apart, me and my twin sister, Mara. We were identical, or close enough to it that our own mother mixed us up until we were 4. We had the same slightly crooked left incisor, the same habit of chewing the inside of our cheek when we were thinking, the same laugh that our high school choir teacher said ruined the alto section because you could hear it 2 rows away. Mara died on the 14th of March, on Route 9 outside of Millbrook, a little after 11 at night. Single vehicle. No other cars involved. The road was dry. She wasn't drunk, the toxicology came back clean. I made sure to get a copy, because some small ugly part of me needed to know she hadn't done anything wrong, that it wasn't a choice, that the last thing she felt wasn't the particular shame of knowing she'd caused it. The report said she left the roadway on a curve just past the reservoir, went down an embankment, and struck a stand of pines hard enough that the responding officer's diagram showed the vehicle's path in a straight, almost gentle-looking line, like a pencil stroke, right up until it wasn't. She was pronounced dead at the scene. I was the one who had to identify her, because our parents were 4 hours away and couldn't get there until morning, and I have never in my life done anything harder than looking at a face that was my own face, stopped. I don't need to explain what it's like to lose a twin to someone who's never had one. I've tried, and it never quite lands. The best I can do is this: when Mara died, it wasn't like losing a sister. It was like losing the half of a sentence that gives the other half meaning. People kept telling me I'd get through it, like grief was a hallway, and I remember thinking, you don't understand, I'm not walking through anything, I am a thing that used to be 2 things, and now it's 1 thing wearing the shape of 2. There's actual research on this. If you look for it, twinless twins report a kind of identity collapse that's different from ordinary sibling grief. A sense that the we has been physically destroyed and they don't know how to locate themselves without it. I didn't know that language existed until I went looking for it. Until I needed it. The funeral was on the 22nd. It's a blur, mostly, a lot of people I half recognized saying the same 4 or 5 sentences in different orders. But I remember one thing clearly, because it snagged on something in me even then, before I understood why. My Aunt Diane hugged me at the reception afterward and said, "I just can't imagine what your parents are going through, losing their only child." I thought I'd misheard her. I said, "I'm right here, Aunt Diane." She looked at me, really looked, the way you look at someone when you think they've said something slightly inappropriate at a funeral, and said, "I know you are, sweetheart." I meant Mara. I let it go. People say strange things at funerals. Grief makes everyone's syntax fall apart a little. I told myself that for weeks. The first piece of paperwork came about 3 weeks later. I needed to renew my driver's license. Mine was expiring at the end of the month, and between everything, I'd let it slip closer to the deadline than I should have. I went to the DMV on a Tuesday morning, sat in the plastic chair for 40 minutes, and when I finally got to the counter, the woman typed my information into her terminal, frowned, typed it again, and said, "I'm sorry, I'm not finding a record for a Josephine Caraway with this date of birth." I told her that was impossible. I'd had a license from this same DMV since I was 16. She had me spell my name 3 different ways. She checked under Mara's name instead, just to see, and there Mara was, full driving history, full record, current license photo and all, a woman who had been dead for 3 weeks pulled up cleanly on the screen like she'd walked in that morning to renew it herself. When the clerk asked if maybe I was thinking of my sister's file by mistake, I said no, I have my own license, I have it right here, and I put my expired card down on the counter in front of her. She looked at the card. She looked at the screen. She looked at me for a long moment in a way I didn't like at all, and then she said, very carefully, "The way you talk to someone you suspected might be having an episode, ma'am, I think you should talk to your family about this." I left without a new license. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I could make myself drive home. I want to be clear that I did not, at that point, think anything supernatural was happening. I thought, county database error. I thought, someone at the DMV merged our files after the accident by mistake, some grief-numbed clerical worker who saw 2 Caraway girls born on the same day and figured one record would do, close the wrong one, or the right one, however you want to think about it. I called the DMV's main office. I called the county clerk. I requested a copy of my birth certificate to sort it out once and for all, because a birth certificate is the bedrock, right? It's the document all the other documents point back to. It came in the mail 11 days later. I want you to picture me at my kitchen table, in the same chair where the folder is sitting right now, opening that envelope expecting to finally have something solid to hand to some overworked government employee so they'd fix their system and leave me alone. The certificate said, "One female child born to Diane and Richard Caraway on the 9th of June, at 11:47 p.m., 7 pounds 1 ounce. Mara Elizabeth Caraway. Singular. One child." My name wasn't on it at all. I called my mother that night, and I did something I'm not proud of, which is that I didn't ask her calmly. I think I actually yelled a little. I said, "Why does the county have no record of me being born? Why does my own birth certificate say Mara was an only child? Is this some kind of sick joke? Did something happen when we were born that nobody ever told me?" And my mother, who had raised 2 daughters for 26 years, who had sewn matching Halloween costumes for us every October until we were old enough to refuse, who once drove 90 minutes at 2 a.m. Because I had a fever and Mara didn't want to be the one to wake her, my mother went very quiet on the phone, and then she said, in a voice that had something wrong underneath it, something I can only describe as apologetic confusion, "Honey, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking me. Mara was my only daughter." I hung up on her. I told myself she was in shock, that grief had scrambled something in her, that people say things they don't mean when they're breaking. I told myself a lot of things that spring. But it kept happening. Small at first, and then not small. My old boss called me by the wrong name in an email, not a typo, a full, confident use of a name I'd never gone by, as if it were simply my name and always had been, as if Josephine had never crossed his desk. I went to visit my childhood best friend, Renata, and she hugged me at the door and asked how I'd been holding up since losing your sister, and I said fine, weird, and then, testing something I didn't yet have the courage to name, I asked her what she remembered about us growing up. She talked for 20 minutes about Mara. Mara's soccer trophies. Mara's terrible first boyfriend. Mara's valedictorian speech. Not once, Not once, in 20 minutes of childhood memories that I had lived through beside her, did Renata mention a second girl in any of them. When I finally asked, directly, "Do you remember there being two of us?" she laughed, a little uncomfortably, and said, "Two of who, hon?" I started keeping a folder. Documentation. I don't know what I thought I was building a case for, or to whom I thought I'd present it, but some animal part of my brain understood that if I didn't collect evidence, I would eventually stop being able to trust my own memory of the fact that I had ever had a name at all. And that's when I started noticing the photographs. I had, boxes of them. Decades of family photos, the kind every household accumulates without meaning to, birthdays, holidays, the two of us in matching dresses at age 6, the two of us glaring at each other over a shared piece of birthday cake at age 11 because we both wanted the corner piece. I went through every album in my parents' house one weekend while they were out, and in every single photograph, every one, there was only Mara. Not Mara and an empty space where I should be. Not a blur, not a smudge, nothing so obviously wrong that you could point at it. Just Mara, alone, in exactly the pose you'd expect if she'd always been alone. Mara blowing out 6 candles by herself. Mara alone at the piano recital, on a bench built for 2. The composition of every photograph was subtly, horribly correct for a single child, as if the camera itself had never known there was a second girl standing just outside the frame, breathing the same air, waiting her turn. I found one photo, just one, tucked in an envelope in the back of a drawer, that I don't think anyone had looked at in 20 years, that showed something different. It was an ultrasound printout, black and grainy, dated the December before we were born. And on it, in my mother's looping cursive, someone had written, "Twins. 2 heartbeats, 9 weeks. 2 sacks. 2 flickering shapes." I sat on my parents' bedroom floor holding that piece of paper like it was the only rope bridge left between 2 cliffs, because it was the only proof I had ever found, the only proof that still existed anywhere in the physical world, that I had once, at some point, been real enough for a machine to detect. I started researching that night, and I didn't stop for a week. I learned about vanishing twin syndrome, a documented, unremarkable, almost boringly common medical phenomenon in which one twin in an early pregnancy simply stops developing and is quietly reabsorbed, its tissue taken up into the body of the sibling who continues on, who is born looking, to every outward measure, like an only child. I learned that the surviving twin in these cases sometimes carries the vanished twin's DNA anyway, folded invisibly into their own, a second, hidden genetic signature tucked into their blood or their skin or the roots of their teeth, discoverable only by accident, only if someone happens to look in exactly the right place with exactly the right test. Doctors have a word for a person built this way. They call them a chimera. A single body carrying 2 people's worth of code, one of whom the world has already agreed never happened. I read that at 2 in the morning, in an apartment that the county now insisted had never been leased to anyone named Josephine, and I felt something in my chest go very cold and very still, because for the first time, a small, terrible idea had a shape I could look directly at. What if I was never supposed to be standing here asking these questions? What if, 30-some years ago, there had been 2 heartbeats on a piece of gray paper, and only one of them had ever actually been meant to keep beating in the world the rest of you live in, and somewhere along the way, something of the other one had held on anyway. Attached itself. Rode inside her sister's growing body like a stowaway, borrowing warmth, borrowing a face, borrowing, eventually, an entire second childhood that technically only had room for one girl in it, because the paperwork, the ultrasound records, the DMV, the actual documented history of this family had only ever had one girl in the budget to begin with. I don't know how else to explain 30 years of birthday parties for a person half the world insists never had a birthday. The dreams started around then, if you can call them dreams. I was somewhere dark and warm and close, somewhere with a sound in it like two hearts beating slightly out of rhythm with each other, and there was a presence beside me in the dark that I understood, the way you understand things in dreams, to be Mara, except it wasn't grown-up Mara. It wasn't the woman who died on Route 9. It was something smaller, something curled and half-formed, something that hadn't decided yet which of us was going to get to keep existing. I would wake up from those dreams with my hands pressed flat against my own stomach, breathing like I'd been running, and for one disorienting half-second every single time, I would forget which one of us I was. I saw her, Mara, twice, after that. Really saw her, awake, in the world, not in any dream. The first time was in the bathroom mirror at my parents' house, 3 days before I stopped being able to get anyone to say my name at all. I was washing my face, and when I looked up, there were two of us in the glass instead of one. Mara standing just behind my left shoulder, exactly where she used to stand for photographs, wearing the same clothes she'd been buried in, her eyes fixed on mine with an expression I can only describe as apology and hunger, both at once, tangled together so tightly I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. I spun around. There was no one in the room but me. When I looked back at the mirror, it was only my own face again, except, and I know how this sounds. Except it didn't feel entirely like my own face anymore. It felt like a face I was borrowing. It felt like it always had. The second time, she didn't need a mirror. I was in my apartment, the apartment the leasing office now had no record of ever renting to me, packing the last of my things into boxes, because it's very hard to keep paying rent on a home the world agrees doesn't belong to you. I heard her voice behind me, clear as anything, the exact particular pitch that used to ruin the alto section, and she said, "You were never supposed to hold on this long." I turned around and she was sitting on the edge of my bed the way she used to sit when we were 16 and staying up too late talking, one leg tucked under her, and there was nothing frightening about how she looked, which was somehow the most frightening thing about it. She looked whole. She looked like herself, entirely, uncomplicatedly, the way a person looks when they've stopped having to share anything with anyone. I asked her if I was dying. She said no. She said it was worse than that, and gentler than that, both at once, that dying was for people who'd been given a full turn in the first place. She said that for 30 years I had been running on borrowed time that had technically belonged to her the whole way through, that some tangled, undeclared piece of me had clung to her in the dark before either of us had a name, and that the two of us together had been enough noise, enough weight, enough shared momentum to trick the world into believing there were two distinct people where the paperwork had only ever authorized one. She said that as long as she was alive to keep vouching for me, in memory, in habit, in the small unconscious ways a person confirms their siblings' existence just by needing them, the world went along with the lie. But she was gone now. And there was no one left whose memory was strong enough, or stubborn enough, or loved me hard enough, to keep insisting I was real against the weight of every document that said otherwise. I asked her what happens now. She didn't answer that. She just reached out and put her hand over mine, the way she used to when we were kids and one of us was scared of a thunderstorm, and it felt exactly like a hand, warm and real and hers, right up until it didn't feel like anything at all. That was 6 days ago. I'm writing this from a motel room now, because the leasing office finally sent someone to change the locks on an apartment they say was never mine. I don't have a license to drive here legally, not that it matters, because the roads don't check identity, only paperwork checks identity, and it turns out paperwork was the only thing keeping me tethered to a life I apparently only ever half owned. My phone still has photos on it, photos I took myself, on this device, with my own hands, and even those are starting to change. Yesterday there was a picture of the two of us at brunch 2 years ago, both of us laughing at something out of frame. This morning, when I opened the same file, it was just Mara at the table, laughing at a joke that, as far as the picture is concerned, nobody else was there to hear. I called my mother one more time tonight, from a blocked number, because I needed to hear her voice, even if it wasn't going to know mine. She picked up, and I said nothing at first, just listened to her breathe on the other end, and then I said, very quietly, "Mom, it's Josie." And there was a pause, a real pause, longer than a stranger's pause, the kind of pause that made my whole chest light up with hope for exactly 1 second. And then she said, "I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong number," and hung up. But here's the thing I need you to understand, the reason I'm writing any of this down at all, even though I know that by the time anyone reads it, there's a real chance the name signed at the bottom won't mean anything to you, won't correspond to any license, any record, any birth certificate anywhere in this county. If you have a sister, or a brother, or a friend so close it feels less like two people than one. If there's ever been a moment where you caught your own reflection and it looked, just for a second, like it was waiting for someone else to step into frame beside it, if you've ever stood in a room full of family photos and felt an ache you couldn't explain, a sense that something should be standing just outside every picture, just past the edge where the camera stopped looking. Please, don't let go of them. Don't let the ones who love you stop being the reason you're allowed to exist. Because I think that's all any of us ever really are, a story someone else keeps agreeing to believe, a name that only stays real as long as somebody's still willing to say it out loud, still willing to fight the paperwork on our behalf, still willing to look at an empty space in a photograph and insist, against everything the world tries to tell them, that someone used to stand right there. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to hold this pen. My handwriting already doesn't look quite like mine. If you ever meet a woman who looks exactly like someone you used to know, who died on Route 9 outside of Millbrook, if she introduces herself with a name you don't recognize, a name that isn't on any form she can show you, please, just for a moment, let her be real. It might be the only thing left that keeps her that way.